It took exactly 4 seconds for Naomi Harris's life to implode. For seconds, that was the gap between a quiet drizzle under the dim streetlight and cold steel closing around her wrists. She didn't even hear the police car pull up. One moment she was walking back from the corner store with a bag of groceries. The next, a voice barked behind her, deep and absolute in its authority. "Ma'am, stop right there. Hands where I can see them." Naomi froze, her fingers still clutching the paper bag. The bread inside was still warm. Somewhere in her brain, that stupid fact clung to life like a lifeboat in a storm. The bread is still warm. Naomi. This can't be real. But it was. The officers didn't ask for her ID. They didn't tell her why. They just grabbed her, twisting her arm behind her back with such force she felt her shoulder pop. Her knees buckled, a gasp escaping her lips. "Wait, what's happening?" she cried, the words tumbling out, half choked by the shock. "You have the right to remain silent," the taller officer began, his voice flat, rehearsed, and entirely uninterested in whether she understood a single syllable. "I think you have the wrong person." Naomi's voice cracked, desperation rising like bile. The second officer, a stocky man with a jawline like a brick, muttered, "Tell it downtown." Rain slid down Naomi's cheek, cold and stinging, but it wasn't enough to drown out the sound of her husband's voice shouting her name from across the street. "Naomi, what the hell are you doing to her?" Derek sprinted across the slick pavement, his shoes skidding slightly. His phone was still in his hand, the screen glowing. Whoever was on the other end was still speaking. Naomi could hear the faint, tinny voice, but Derek wasn't listening. "She didn't do anything," he shouted, pushing past a neighbor who had stepped out onto her porch to watch. The taller cop stepped into Derek's path, palm out like a traffic sign. "Sir, step back." "No. You tell me what she's being arrested for right now." Derek's voice was shaking, not from fear, but fury. His free hand curled into a fist. The officer's eyes narrowed. "Interfering with an arrest is a chargeable offense. Step back." Naomi twisted her head toward her husband, eyes wide and pleading. "Call," she started, but her voice caught in her throat as the realization hit her. She didn't know who he should call. A lawyer? A friend? Her mother? That's when Derek's phone buzzed again. The caller's name flashed in bright letters: LT. Stevens. Naomi didn't know the name, but Derek did. And the moment he saw it, his face changed. The fury drained out of him, replaced by something far colder. His lips pressed into a thin line. He answered. "Stevens?" His voice was tight. "Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. They've got Naomi." "No, they didn't even." He stopped, listening. His eyes flickered toward the officers, then to Naomi. And then, his expression shifted again, this time to something Naomi had never seen before in all their 12 years together. It was part disbelief, part horror. "You're telling me," Derek said slowly, "that if I say one thing right now, their careers are over?" Both officers paused mid-motion, their grip on Naomi tightening ever so slightly. Rain pattered harder on the pavement, the street humming with the muffled buzz of onlookers' whispers. The red and blue lights kept pulsing, painting Naomi's skin in jagged flashes of color. "Derek," Naomi whispered, "what's going on?" But Derek didn't answer her. His gaze was locked on the officers, his jaw set. "You're damn right I'm still here," he said into the phone. "And you're damn right I'm going to say it." Naomi's heart pounded against her ribcage. Something was coming, something bigger than the humiliation of being cuffed in front of her neighbors. She just didn't know yet whether it would save her or burn them all to the ground. Naomi had grown up knowing the rules. Keep your head down. Smile, but not too much. Never argue when you're being questioned. And above all, didn't give them a reason. But tonight proved something she had always feared. Sometimes, you didn't have to give them a reason. They'd make one up for you. Her crime? Being a black woman, walking alone at night, carrying a bag of groceries. At least, that was the only explanation she had. Until Derek's voice cut through the rain like a blade. "You know who my wife is?" The taller cop shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, no, you don't," Derek snapped. "Because if you did, you wouldn't be touching her." Naomi's mind was a whirlwind. Who did he think she was? She was a teacher, for God's sake. Not a politician, not a celebrity. "Sir, we're conducting an investigation," the stocky cop said stiffly. "Investigation into what?" Derek's tone was razor-sharp. The taller cop hesitated. It was the kind of hesitation that told Naomi they weren't entirely sure themselves. That's when Derek lowered his phone, looked Naomi dead in the eye, and said something that made her stomach turn to ice. They think you're someone else. Someone dangerous. It didn't make sense until Derek added, almost under his breath, and the person they think you are is dead. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Dead. The word didn't feel real, not in the context of her life, not in the middle of this cold, wet night with bread still in her grocery bag. What do you mean dead? She asked, her voice trembling but sharp enough to cut through the rain. The taller officer shifted uneasily, eyes darting toward his partner. The stocky one didn't answer. His jaw worked like he was grinding his molars into dust. Derek's voice dropped, low and deadly. They're looking for a suspect in a shooting 2 nights ago. A black woman. About your height. About your build. Only problem? That suspect was pronounced dead this morning in custody. But apparently, these two here, he gestured at the officers, his tone thick with venom, either didn't get the memo or don't give a damn. Naomi's pulse thundered in her ears. So, what? You're saying they knew this? I'm saying they should have known. Derek's grip on the phone tightened. Stevens just told me. Every precinct in the district was updated. Every officer was supposed to stand down on this ID. And yet here we are. The taller cop cleared his throat. Sir, this is a misunderstanding. Don't you dare call this a misunderstanding. Derek snapped, stepping forward, his shadow stretching long under the flashing lights. You dragged my wife into the street in front of our neighbors. You put your hands on her without probable cause. You humiliated her. And you didn't even bother to check the damn system before you cuffed her. Naomi's stomach churned. She glanced at the small crowd gathering, faces half hidden in hoods, eyes wide, phones out, recording. She knew in her bones that this was already going online. The taller cop's voice tightened. Sir, please calm down. Derek's laugh was humorless and sharp. Oh, I'm calm. In fact, I'm calm enough to tell you that the man I'm on the phone with right now is your superior's superior. And he's listening to every damn word you say. For the first time, Naomi saw fear flash in their eyes, not the fear of physical harm, but the kind that comes from realizing you've just stepped into a career-ending sinkhole. The rain kept falling, heavy now, drumming against Naomi's skin, soaking her hair and sweater. She shifted uncomfortably against the cold bite of the cuffs. Derek, she said softly, just get me out of these. He nodded once, turning back to the phone. You heard her. I want those cuffs off, now. The officers hesitated. The taller one muttered something into his shoulder mic, but Derek's voice cut through before he could finish. No, don't call it in like it's your decision. You uncuff her now, and you hand me your badge numbers. There was a long beat of silence, broken only by the squelch of rainwater under shifting boots. Finally, the stocky one moved first. Without looking Naomi in the eye, he stepped behind her, pressed the release, and the cold bite of metal fell away from her wrists. The sudden freedom made her skin ache where the cuffs had dug in. She rubbed her wrists, staring down at the angry red marks. Badge numbers, Derek said again, his voice like steel. Both men rattled them off reluctantly, their voices low, as if hoping the cameras around them wouldn't pick it up. But the crowd was silent, every phone raised higher, every microphone catching every syllable. Naomi glanced toward the nearest neighbor, Mrs. Lang, an older white woman who usually avoided eye contact on the rare occasions they crossed paths. Tonight, she was standing on her porch, arms crossed, her face unreadable. For a strange moment, Naomi wondered if this was the first time Mrs. Lang had seen her as anything other than the black woman who moved in next door. The taller officer cleared his throat again. Ma'am, we regret the error, don't, Naomi cut in. Her voice was steady now, the fear giving way to something sharper, harder. Don't you dare dress this up as an error. You saw a black woman walking alone at night and decided that was enough to justify slamming her into the pavement. You wanted it to be me. The officer opened his mouth, but Derek raised a hand. Save it for the review board. You'll have plenty of time to explain yourselves there. They left without another word, retreating to their cruiser, the flashing lights finally blinking off. The street seemed darker without them, quieter but not calmer. The air still hummed with the charged energy of what had just happened. Naomi and Derek stood there for a moment, the rain soaking them both. She finally turned to him. Stevens. Who is he? Derek exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding that breath the whole time. Internal affairs. High up. I met him a few years ago when I was working a case for the city. We've kept in touch. You didn't think to tell me? Her voice wasn't accusing, just weary. I didn't think we'd ever need him like this. Derek's gaze darkened. Naomi. They weren't just sloppy. Stevens says this wasn't even their jurisdiction. They came out here on purpose. Someone wanted this to happen. Her stomach twisted again. Why? That, Derek said grimly, is what I'm going to find out. The next day, Naomi sat in their kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. Every muscle in her body felt like it had been twisted into knots. The footage was everywhere now. Someone in the crowd had uploaded it before the cops even left the street. By morning, it was on every major social media feed. Hashtags, think pieces, outrage. The video showed everything. The rain, the cuffs, Derek's call, the exact moment the officers realized they'd stepped in it. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends, colleagues, reporters she'd never met. Her principal had called, voice trembling with some mix of concern and PR anxiety. Naomi, take the week off. We'll figure this out. Derek, meanwhile, had been on the phone since dawn. She could hear him in the living room now, pacing. Yes, I want the records from last night. No, I don't care if they went missing. Find them. When he finally came into the kitchen, his expression was darker than she'd ever seen it. They weren't just acting on bad intel, he said, sitting across from her. Stevens pulled the dispatch logs. There was no active warrant. No ongoing investigation. Someone told them you matched the suspect, even after the system marked her deceased. Naomi blinked. But why me? That's the question, Derek said. And I think whoever it is wanted to send a message. By noon, reporters were camped outside. Naomi stayed inside, shades drawn, trying to breathe through the gnawing anxiety in her chest. That's when Derek got the call that changed everything again. It wasn't Stevens this time. It was a name Naomi didn't recognize. Derek listened for a long moment, nodding slowly. When he hung up, he said, Naomi, this wasn't random. It's connected to my last case. Her heart sank. Derek had worked some dangerous ones: corruption, fraud, organized crime. Meaning, he said, someone knows the fastest way to get to me is through you. She stared at him, the edges of the world blurring. So they used the police to, not just the police, Derek cut in. They used those two officers, the ones I exposed last year for falsifying evidence. They never lost their jobs. They just got transferred. Naomi's mouth went dry. So last night was payback. Exactly. That night, Stevens came by in person. A tall man with graying hair and a measured calm. He sat at their dining table, a manila folder in front of him. You need to understand, he said. This goes higher than just two bad cops. The fact they were able to act on false information that should have been purged means someone in the department covered for them. Naomi glanced at Derek. So what now? Stevens's eyes met hers. Now, we build a case, and we burn them down from the inside. For the first time since the cuffs closed around her wrists, Naomi felt something stirring under the fear. Not quite hope, but something sharper. Resolve. Naomi had never seen her dining table look like that, covered in papers, photos, printouts of dispatch logs, and a laptop playing surveillance footage on a loop. It felt less like a home and more like a war room. Derek and Stevens sat opposite each other, trading documents without looking up. The hum of the rain outside seemed quieter tonight, but inside, the air was heavy with strategy. Naomi hovered near the kitchen doorway, holding a cup of tea she hadn't touched. You two look like you've been doing this for years, she said, her voice low. Derek gave her a tired half-smile. In a way, we have. Only difference is, this time, it's personal. Stevens tapped a file. The first thing you need to know is that Officers Kane and Mitchell, those are the two from last night, weren't supposed to be anywhere near your street. Their patrol sector is 3 miles away. They were redirected. Naomi frowned. Redirected by who? That's where it gets muddy. Stevens slid a printout across the table. It was a screenshot of a dispatch terminal, the message log partially redacted. The reroute came from an unassigned terminal. That means someone used a guest login. Derek leaned forward. Which means they were hiding their ID. Exactly, Stevens said. And here's the kicker: the timestamp on that reroute is exactly 7 minutes after you left the house last night, Naomi. She blinked. You're saying someone was watching me? Not just watching, Stevens said. Tracking. Her stomach dropped. She set the tea down before her hands could shake it out of the cup. So they knew I was alone. Derek's jaw tightened. This is retaliation. Clear as day. The hours bled together as they dug deeper. Derek worked the phones, calling old contacts in the department. Stevens disappeared for an hour, returning with a thumb drive and a grim expression. "What's that?" Naomi asked. "Body cam footage," Stevens said. "From Kane and Mitchell. I had to pull strings to get it before it got misplaced." He plugged it into the laptop. The video opened on a shaky view of a dark road, rain streaking across the lens. The dash display in the cruiser glowed faintly in the corner. Kane's voice came first, low and mocking. "Yeah, that's her. Perfect match." Mitchell laughed. "This is going to be good." Naomi's stomach clenched. The camera caught the moment they pulled up, the door swinging open. Her figure appeared in the grainy distance, grocery bag in hand. Kane's voice again, "Watch, she'll run." And then the sprint toward her, the rough grab, the cuffs. The whole thing was their every second of humiliation, every word of protest they ignored. Naomi's eyes burned. "They thought it was a joke," she whispered. "Worse," Stevens said. "They thought it was sport." By the third day, the story had exploded beyond anything Naomi could have imagined. The video had been picked up by national outlets. Civil rights groups were calling for an independent investigation. Hashtags trended by the hour. But with the attention came something darker. Late that night, while Derek was still on the phone with a journalist, Naomi checked her own messages. Buried among the outpouring of support were threats, anonymous accounts sending lines like "should've just stayed in your place" and "next time, no cameras." She didn't show Derek. Not yet. Instead, she pulled the curtains tighter, double-checked the locks, and sat on the couch in the dim light of the TV, scrolling through every frame of the body cam footage until the rain outside was drowned out by the sound of her own heartbeat. On the fourth day, Stevens brought news. "They're panicking," he said, stepping inside without preamble. "Mitchell put in for sudden leave. Kane's been moved to desk duty. Internal affairs is circling." Naomi didn't feel the satisfaction she thought she would. "So they'll lose their jobs?" "Maybe," Stevens said, "if we're lucky. But if you want more than that, if you want to make sure they can't hide behind the badge ever again, we need to connect them to the people who set this up." Derek nodded. "Which means following the money." The break came that evening. Stevens had been running the reroute terminal's IP through every database he could access. The match, when it came, was almost too neat. "A law office?" Naomi asked, staring at the printout. "Not just any law office," Stevens said. "This one represents half the cops in disciplinary trouble in this city. They specialize in getting charges dropped and records sealed." Derek's voice went cold. "And they were on the other side of my last case." Naomi felt the pieces click into place like a lock turning. "So they used Kane and Mitchell to hit back at you." "Exactly," Stevens said. "And they didn't care if it meant destroying your life in the process." That night, Derek made a decision. He called the journalist back, but this time, Naomi listened from the doorway. "I'm ready to go on record," he said. "Names, dates, everything. But I'm not giving you a quote. I'm giving you the tapes." When he hung up, he turned to Naomi. "If we do this, it's going to get uglier before it gets better. They're going to come after us harder. They'll try to discredit you, dig through every inch of our lives." Naomi held his gaze. "They already took my dignity on that street. I'm not letting them take my silence too." Derek nodded once. The article dropped the next morning. It wasn't just about the arrest, it was about the network behind it. Names, connections, documents. The body cam transcript printed in full. Photos of Kane and Mitchell alongside records of prior complaints that had vanished from their files after administrative review. The backlash was immediate. The mayor's office announced a formal inquiry. The police chief held a tense press conference, his voice brittle as he promised full cooperation. But Naomi knew better. This wasn't over. That night, their front window shattered. The sound was sharp and Sedina pop like a gunshot, followed by the tinkle of glass hitting hardwood. Derek yanked her to the floor before she could even process it. When the police arrived, it was a different set of uniforms this time, faces grim but careful. They found a brick wrapped in paper. The note inside was short, written in block letters. "Drop it, or you'll wish the cuffs were the worst of it." The next day, Stevens showed up with another folder, this one thinner, but somehow heavier. "We traced the brick to a man with ties to the law office," he said. "They're escalating, which means we're close." Naomi felt the knot in her chest tighten. Close to what? Stevens's eyes were steady. Close to the person who ordered the reroute. The one pulling all the strings. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She sat by the kitchen window, staring out at the street where it had all started. Somewhere out there, she thought, someone decided she was expendable. Someone decided her skin was enough to make her a target. But they'd made a mistake. They'd given her a reason to fight. By the end of the week, Stevens had the name. It was almost anticlimactic, just a name on a piece of paper, written in neat black ink. But Derek's face when he read it told Naomi everything. Of course, he said bitterly. Of course it's him. Naomi didn't know the man personally, but she knew that Tippy, a senior police union official, loud in the press, louder behind closed doors. The kind who'd built a career protecting the worst in the force under the banner of brotherhood. And now, he was the link between the law office, Kane and Mitchell, and the night they tried to break her. Stevens leaned back in his chair. We can take this to the DA? With the body cam, the dispatch logs, and the connection to the union, we have enough to push for conspiracy charges. Naomi felt a slow, cold satisfaction settle in her bones. Then let's do it. Derek glanced at her, a flicker of pride in his eyes. They picked the wrong couple to mess with. The district attorney's office wasn't built for moments like this. Naomi could feel it in the way the receptionist's hands fluttered nervously over the keyboard, the way security glanced between her and Derek with a flicker of recognition. This case had already seeped into the public bloodstream by now. Every hallway whisper in the building carried her name. They were ushered into a glass-walled conference room. Stevens was already there, a folder in front of him so thick it looked like it could anchor a ship. The DA, a sharp-eyed woman named Carla Ruiz, sat across from him, pin-poised but still. You've got my attention, Ruiz said, looking between Naomi and Derek. But attention doesn't equal conviction. Talk me through it. Stevens didn't waste a second. 2 officers, Kane and Mitchell, arrested Mrs. Harris without probable cause. They acted on a false identification of a suspect already confirmed deceased. We've traced the directive to reroute them from their patrol zone to an unassigned terminal linked to the law firm of Gray and Halvorsen, which represents multiple officers under disciplinary review. Ruiz's pen moved fast. You're saying the law firm interfered with police dispatch? Yes, Stevens said, at the behest of a senior police union official, Daniel Crowley. Naomi caught the faint tightening in Ruiz's jaw. She knew that name. Everyone in this city did. Derek leaned forward. Crowley wanted me punished for a case I worked 2 years ago. He couldn't touch me directly, so he went after my wife. He used Kane and Mitchell as the blunt instrument. Naomi spoke up, her voice steadier than she felt. They didn't just arrest me. They humiliated me in my own neighborhood. They made me a target because of the color of my skin, because they thought they could get away with it. Ruiz's gaze sharpened. And you have proof? Stevens slid the folder across the table. Dispatch logs. Body cam footage. Financial transactions between Crowley and Gray and Halvorsen. We also have a recording Crowley instructing an associate to make it messy for Derek Harris. Ruiz flipped through the papers, silent for a long moment. Then she closed the folder. You're about to start a war with the most protected man in this department. Naomi met her eyes. Good. Let's make sure we win. The indictment came 2 weeks later. Crowley was charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. Kane and Mitchell were named as co-conspirators. Gray and Halvorsen was slapped with a subpoena that made headlines by the hour. But victory, Naomi learned quickly, wasn't clean. The threats doubled. Unmarked cars lingered at the end of their street. News vans camped outside their house, microphones flashing like weapons. She couldn't walk into a grocery store without someone stopping her, some to thank her, some to sneer. One night, Derek came home to find the word liar spray painted across their front steps. Naomi scrubbed it off herself. The trial began in late autumn. The courtroom was packed, everyday activists, journalists, police officers in plain clothes. The air buzzed with tension. Naomi took the stand on the 3rd day. Her palms sweated against the wood of the witness stand, but her voice didn't waver. She told them everything: the rain, the cuffs, the cold steel digging into her wrists, the look in Kane's eyes when he said, "Tell it downtown." She watched Crowley across the room, his expression unreadable, but his jaw tightened when Stevens played the recording. Make it messy. The words echoed through the courtroom like a nail being driven into wood. By the time she stepped down, Her knees felt like water. But the room was silent, every eye on her. The defense fought hard. They painted her as confused, overreacting, opportunistic. They leaned on technicalities, tried to muddy the dispatch evidence. They called character witnesses who swore Kane and Mitchell were good men. But then the prosecution called witnesses of their own people Kane and Mitchell had arrested without cause. Stories eerily similar to Naomi's, stories that had been buried in internal reviews until now. By the end of the second week, the jury looked different. Faces hardened. Notes scribbled faster. The verdict came down on a gray afternoon. Guilty. On all counts. Crowley's face finally cracked, a flash of disbelief giving way to rage before the bailiffs led him away. Kane and Mitchell stared straight ahead, their badges already surrendered. Naomi sat very still, letting the words sink in. She wasn't sure she felt triumph not yet, but she felt something like release. That night, their street was quiet again for the first time in months. No cameras, no shadows in parked cars, just the sound of wind moving through the trees. Naomi stood on the porch, a mug of tea warming her hands. Derek stepped out beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," she thought. But she didn't say it. She just stared out at the street where everything had begun, at the place where her life had been cracked open and remade. "They'll talk about this case for years," Derek said. "Good," Naomi murmured. "Maybe next time, they'll think twice." Months later, the headlines had faded. The legal reforms promised in the wake of the trial were crawling through city council, half watered down, half stalled. Change was slow, too slow. But every so often, Naomi would get a letter, sometimes from strangers across the country, sometimes from women in her own city thanking her for standing up. She kept them in a drawer by the kitchen table. On bad days, she'd take them out and read them one by one. One afternoon in early spring, she was walking home from school when a police cruiser slowed beside her. Her chest tightened instinctively, but the window rolled down, and a young black officer leaned out. "Mrs. Harris?" he asked. She nodded, wary. "I just wanted to say, what you did, it mattered. To people like me. To the ones coming up behind me. We see it." Naomi blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you," she said quietly. The officer nodded once, then drove on. She stood there for a moment, the breeze warm against her face, the world moving again. And for the first time since that rainy night, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the fight had been worth it. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.